It is the Dino Report at thedinoreport.com. Hour number 2 on a midweek Wednesday show across North America, around the world. Magic Matt is back. He is your producer extraordinaire on this Wednesday show. 3rd of 5, award-winning and blockbuster endeavor, sports, politics, life. Hey, now everything in between. Hey, good stuff. Good stuff. Want to call the show? You're going to have to do it later. Can't do it now. 844-NOW-DINO, because I got a guest coming up. 844-NOW-DINO. That's 844-669-3466. Welcome. Those who were on board the Right Side Broadcasting Network, some flipped over here to hour 2 of the show at thedinoreport.com, so welcome to those people as well. Donald J. Trump, 45th sitting president of these not United States of America, currently. But we hope that's going to change. Made a speech to Congress last night, really a speech to the American people, if not the world. Brandon J. Weichert watched the speech. He writes for AmericanGreatness.com. I read his columns, reached out to him today, said, Brandon, you want to come on the show? What do you think? You're a big by the way, Double MD, Brandon is a big Bears fan, just to let you know. He's a big Bears fan. He's also right now, in addition and concurrent with being a Bears fan, he is a former Republican congressional staffer and national security expert who now runs something known as the WEICHERT Report. Go to the WEICHERTReport.com. That's WEICHERT, WEICHERT Report. It's an online journal of geopolitics. He holds a master's degree in statecraft and national security from the Institute of World Politics in Washington, D.C. He's also an associate member of New College at Oxford University, holds a BA in political science from DePaul University, currently completing a book on national security space policy, and it's due out next year. My pleasure and privilege to welcome Brandon Weichert onto the Dino Report on this Wednesday. Brandon, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. How are you doing, Dino? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. It's, just living the dream here, just doing this show on sports, politics, life, and everything in between. And sometimes we feature people like you, and I'm glad you're here to speak with me on a number of geopolitical issues and items. And let me refer and go back to the speech last night. I thought you nailed it in your column today. It was pitch perfect. It hit on all the right notes. It was inspirational. It was uplifting. It fit the theme of the Donald J. Trump presidency perfectly. You want to add anything else?
No, I think that yet again the mainstream media and the pundit class, particularly those out here in D.C. and in New York, have gotten it wrong. When they were saying that he was moderating and that in the build up to the speech last night, that they were trying to basically psych us out, who are Trump supporters, by trying to make us think that the president was wavering, when of course he wasn't. I don't think wavering is even in his vocabulary. So I wrote that article immediately after the speech was over, because I just, yet again, the media was wrong.
Well, that's a shock, huh?
Yeah.
That's a shock. I was shocked last night. I read that Van Jones, I even saw that Van Jones said that last night Donald J. Trump became the president of the United States. So did this guy have an epiphany? If he did, it's probably going to last no more than 24 hours, I bet.
Well, the epiphany, he's about a month too late. It's one of those things where I was listening. I spend a lot of time listening to MSNBC and CNN. I always joke so others don't have to. And they were all saying that. Even Chris Wallace at Fox said that. And it just blew my mind, because in the same breath that they were saying that, they were then turning around and nitpicking every little thing about that speech. And now part of that's because it's a 24-hour news cycle and they have to have something to talk about. And another part, a bigger part, though, is the fact that they do not want him to succeed. And it doesn't matter what his party is. It's because he's not part of that upper class, even though he has a lot of money. He's not part of that kind of in club. And he's upsetting the system just by him being there. He was rocking the cart. If you listen to the speech yesterday, particularly the part about infrastructure, that is something that I could never believe that the Democrats would be booing and hemming and hawing at something that used to be part of their platform. But then again, this is the party that abandoned the working class, for the transgender, gender neutral whatever, and it's very sad to see. But it's not surprising. So is Van Jones having an epiphany? No, I think he was just trying to give a little tip of his hat before he went in for the kill, or tried to.
Well, you mentioned he's not one of them. He's not a part of the elite political establishment. He's not a career politician. I think that not only do the lefties, kill him over this, in addition and concurrent with the things he says and the things he wants to do, but, members of his own party can't stand him as well in so many ways. I was taken by the thing that I didn't like is I rewatched the speech today because the speech took place during the midst of the show last night, Brandon, and we played certain excerpts of it during the last hour of my show last night.
Yeah.
But the thing that I didn't like was watching that smarmy-ass-looking Paul Ryan sitting behind Trump on the dais as he was at the podium yesterday. And if there was ever a picture of what doesn't belong and why in that environment, it is Paul Ryan. But I think he's got, when I say he, I'm referring to Trump, I think he has got the political establishment on both sides of the aisle very frightened right now, but perhaps more so on the left for obvious reasons, those being that if he is able to govern in the ways that he wants to, if he has a rising tide lifts all boats sort of scenario at the conclusion of his presidency, America's back to work, factories are back in business, we've got walls up and borders that are defined, people are happy, people are prosperous, unemployment is down, all that stuff. For the left, this is exposing the myth of governance the way that they want to govern, and it would completely and totally eradicate all talking points from the left, probably forever. So, as I've been thinking about this a little bit more, Brandon, not only is Trump a phenomenon that really is not truly part of Republican ideology, and in a way, he's kind of smashed the Republican Party down several notches. At the end of the day, when he's all said and done, he may expose both sides of the aisle for being myths and for being falsehoods that have been perpetuated by politicians for years and really redefine politics in America like never before.
Well, I think you're spot on. I think that he already has. I actually wrote an article for American Greatness by, I think it was either right before the election or right after. It was FDR. It was basically saying that Trump is the Republicans' FDR, and that's a good thing. And what I meant by that was the fact that he was basically going to be as much of a change agent to the way the U.S. government operates as FDR was, except I think he's going to go in reverse in the sense that he's not going to seek to create an administrative state like FDR created, but he's going to slowly but surely repeal so much of that bloated Leviathan that we call the federal government and that I once served, on Capitol Hill. And I think it's great. I think that you're right. I think he is absolutely. In fact, I can tell you with 100% certainty, because I still have a lot of friends on the Hill, I can tell you with 100% certainty that many of my Republican friends who are staffers are as mortified, if not more so, of the prospect of a successful Trump presidency as the Democrats are. And for the reasons you stated, and even in my article from yesterday at American Greatness and in a few other articles I've written at American Greatness, the fact is that much like Reagan, Donald Trump is going to have to be more worried about his own Republicans in Congress than he will the Democrats, for the simple fact that the Democrats are in utter disarray right now. They're completely, they've put Tom Perez in charge of the DNC. He was Obama's former labor secretary. And yes, he's a leftist, but he's also of the Hillary Clinton wing, which means that the Democratic Party is going to be going through these convulsions for at least the next 4 years. So the real threat to the Trump presidency in terms of his change agenda is going to come from that never Trump crowd and the kind of GOP establishment wing. And in fact, when you mentioned Paul Ryan, I do think you're right about Paul Ryan, but I think the bigger threat in terms of the Republican leadership is probably going to come from Mitch McConnell, who right before the speech yesterday, I was watching, he did an exclusive interview with Martha McCallum of Fox News, and right out of the bat, he said that Donald Trump's victory represented nothing, and that the Republicans had been winning for 6 years before Trump ever got there. And I burst out laughing because I was on the Hill. My first day on the Hill was during the shutdown. And I can tell you right now, the Republicans were not winning for the last 6 years. The Tea Party and the activist wing of the GOP was pushing the Republicans over the finish line But they were very reluctant. In fact, I'm convinced that the Republicans were quite content to be a privileged minority on Capitol Hill. Because, let's face it, to be in the majority means they have to govern. And if they have to govern, that means they have to listen to the people. And the people do not want to continue seeing these privileged politicians living at their expense.
You can find Brandon's work at the WEICHERTReport.com, the WEICHERTReport.com. It is Brandon Weichert here in hour number 2, 14 minutes after the hour on this Wednesday Dino Report show. It is so juicy from so many different angles, Brandon, when I consider the Trump presidency. I mentioned Paul Ryan. I could throw John McCain in there. I could throw John Kasich in there. I can throw Mitch McConnell in there. All of these elitists, Jeb Bush, you want to throw him in there. There's a number of people that I'm leaving out that you could throw in there. The fact is that all this time later, after the November 8th election, they still have not wrapped their minds around the fact that Trump is indeed the president, and more than that, they just cannot understand how this political neophyte came in uninvited, crashed the party, ate all the food, ate all the dessert, drank what he wanted to, left, and galvanized a country and created a movement that on their best day, the aforementioned individuals I just included would never be able to do. And you can just tell there is so much green envy going on right now, and they literally cannot stand this man.
Well, and the fact that Trump was able to eat all that food in the same party as Chris Christie is very, very impressive.
Yeah.
No, I have to say that you're completely correct again. Although I don't think Donald Trump is actually a political neophyte. I think he very early on understood that the kind of rules of the game changed fundamentally. I would argue with Barack Obama, because Obama was the first guy. I worked the 2012 election at the grassroots level, and Obama was the first guy to figure out how to use the internet, to figure out how to use kind of unorthodox messaging to reach voters who otherwise would not have come out and voted for him. And I think that Trump recognized that the kind of traditional campaign model was completely blown up because of social media, because of the democratization of the media, of the way that politicians can reach out to a base, and the fact that he was coming at it from the entertainment industry. He had a fundamental understanding, I think, 25 years of how to communicate to people, not to mention the fact that he was a very effective salesman. So he knows how to communicate to people, and he understands that you don't go through the filter of the entrenched media. You just don't do it. You go to Twitter. You go directly to the source. And so I think actually the neophytes, in a way, were the establishment politicians who completely spent all this money and missed the boat entirely that, hey, I can do a simple tweet and I can reach more people and get more people galvanized if I'm saying the right things and I believe them, as Trump does. I think Trump actually isn't the neophyte. I think he created a whole new system. I think he's completely upended the system.
That's an interesting.
And when the politicians realize that, they're going to start doing better, but they can't realize it because they're creatures of the old system.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I'm interested to know how you're going to respond to what I'm going to say next. When Trump announced his candidacy, when he rode down the elevator all those months ago at Trump Tower, said he was running for president. Of course, the entire country and the full gamut of the liberal media went bonkers with all kinds of humorous, sarcastic things that they said about him. And when he started to generate a campaign, I got behind the idea. He was the first guy that I endorsed. But, as the primary season rolled on and the debates got underway, as much as I wanted to believe initially in the first several months, Brandon, that the idea of a Trump presidency to crash the system that had been in place for so long was appealing enough, there was a big part of me that refused to believe that this, let me use the word again, neophyte, this guy, this interloper from the outside who has no political experience, there was no way, even though he had a massive amount of support, I just couldn't believe that he was going to be able to finish the deal and win the presidency. It wasn't until, I would say, a good 6-7 months before Election Day that I was bound and determined to do what I could to ensure that Trump was going to become the president of the United States. And I'm interested to know the chronological order of sequence and events in your own life as you viewed this, going back to the genesis of when Trump did announce his candidacy, all through the primary season, up to the time he won the nomination, and right up to Election Day. Did you have any similar feelings to those of mine, that as much as you might have been attracted to this, you just couldn't see it happening?
Well, it's funny that the short answer is a little bit, but the long answer, or I'll try to make it as short as possible, was when he announced, I was at Oxford in England, and living there at that time was surreal because you had the Brexit thing going on, and everyone at Oxford, of course, was saying it's never going to happen. And I, the loudmouth American, was saying, no, I think that you guys should listen to the guys that I talk to at the pubs, who are the blue-collar workers here, and they don't like what's happening. And then you have Trump, announcing, and everybody's saying, oh, God, you Americans are going to have a fun election. Look at this clown. I said to them, look, I spent many years, since I was 18, working on grassroots conservative campaigns. I know the base of the party. They're galvanized right now. And if he can get past the first couple weeks of the primary season, this guy's serious, and he's going to resonate with a lot of people because he's not your typical guy. He's not the typical person that runs for office. And, of course, I tracked it, and everybody laughed at me. And this was actually part of the reason why I started the WEICHERT Report, because as I used my training and I stepped back and looked at the entire international system, and I realized it's not just Brexit, it's not just Trump. There is a wave of anti-globalization nationalism that's sweeping across the globe, and nobody was accurately reporting on it. So I started my website, the WEICHERT Report, to try to, as best I could, with limited resources, to try to analyze this stuff. And you find that Trump is part of a larger pattern at play here. And it actually, to me, as when I thought of it that way, and I was getting laughed at and mocked at by fellow Republicans, everyone,
yeah.
I maintained, I said, look, whether you like the guy or not, he's tapped into something. Lenin said that the power was running in the streets, waiting to be picked up in 1917. And that's exactly how, not that I'm not saying that he's Lenin, of course, but my point is that, these really, the real agents of change, they recognize things and they take advantage of it that the rest of the world or their country doesn't see. And so toward that end, I really believed very early on that he was going to be the guy. Now, where I had problems was I thought, well, I actually thought after the convention when he kept hitting Ted Cruz, my concern was that, oh, my God, he's going off the rails. But then that quickly corrected itself within 4 or 5 days. He brought in that new team with Kellyanne Conway, and they went right back on, Trump being Trump, and it was fantastic. And so I have to say, if I may toot my own horn, I actually did, just because of my experiences, I actually felt that this guy was going to be the guy that broke all the odds. And I just wish I had, bet on it, because I probably would have made a lot of money. But I actually, from the very beginning, though, I truly believed that he was going to be the guy.
Okay, you just invoked the name of Kellyanne Conway, and she's been in the news in the last 24, 48 hours, and I want to know how you feel about this.
Couchgate?
Yeah, the couch thing, with her heels dug into the couch, and she's, Michael Savage was very critical of this. Savage has been on a warpath lately about Kellyanne Conway. Is being overblown, in your opinion? How do you feel about this whole thing?
Well, look, I've worked behind the scenes for political people. I've been at events like they were at, a packed, small room, and you, as part of your duty when you're staffing the principal, the primary, which is your candidate, or in this case, the president, part of your job is you've got to get photos for the staff, for the team, outside of the official photos. And it was a very historic meeting for the Trump presidency, particularly given all of the charges of racism. So she was trying to get, from what I saw and from what it has sounded like from people that I know in the administration, she was actually just trying to get a good shot on her camera because there was no other room. Now, in terms of what she was doing, sitting with her feet on it, that is really not that big of a deal. It's totally overblown. I do understand why I have some friends in the military who were kind of upset, saying it's just very disrespectful. She looked like she was way too relaxed. That's the White House. I can respect those claims, but when I hear it from the left, the party of let me put on a vagina hat and go terrorize the denizens of Washington D.C. as a form of protest, it doesn't ring true. These charges of she's being inappropriate. I think it's overblown, and I think that she was just trying to actually staff her boss, which is part of her job description, and that's how it goes. Politics behind the scenes, I've worked it. It's not pretty. It's not ugly. I mean, it's not pretty, and it's very ugly. So.
What is try to explain to me the liberal mentality here or a never Trumpers mentality when you talk about the way that Trump wants to get things done and rebuild the infrastructure in the country and build the wall and putting America first, and I stop there. Putting America first, what a novel damn concept. After an 8-year endless apology tour around the globe by the guy that was in office before him, here's a guy that's talking about American nationalism, American strength, putting America first, putting the American people first, worrying about American needs and American interests before anything else.
Right.
And yet, as some American citizens object to this. And I really wonder, Brandon, if these people are psychologically wired in all kinds of sick and twisted ways that they refuse to wrap their mind around the fact that they live in America, and when they compare and contrast virtually each and every country across this globe in terms of what their interests are in a democratic sort of a society, that those countries are always putting their interests first before anyone else. Why should America be any different?
It's funny. I just had this debate with a very good friend of mine who I will not say who he is, but he's involved with politics, and he is an ardent never Trumper. And I actually made a similar comment, and basically what I got from it was that, first of all, to some of these people, particularly of the never Trump variety, they genuinely believe that America must always have this open border anarchy because it's a symbol to the rest of the world that we are open, and that will win through soft power hearts and minds and will help to fight terrorism and all that other. They really believe this kind of pedantic stuff. And then the other part is the fact that you have moneyed interests who are supporting both mainstream Republican movements and Democrats. And they are very much interested in keeping America's borders open and putting America last because their personal economic or their businesses' economic interests would be harmed by that. And then you also have the academic community who, aside from being leftists, they also, when they hear the term America First, they're hardwired to go, oh, no, that reminds us of isolationism and pre-World War II, and we don't want to do that. And as I have noted many times in my writing, Trump is a literalist. He's not harking back to the isolationist movement before World War II. He's just meaning literally, I want to ensure that we have policies that put America first. He's not an isolationist. He's not a libertarian in that way. He doesn't want to isolate America as many of these academics believe. It's just that's a turn of phrase because he knows how to communicate to people. He just wants to put America first. That's all. And so you have those different mentalities playing into the resistance to Trump. And that's probably why you're seeing this kind of backlash, even though he's done, especially for my friends on the right, he has done such an incredible job of putting in, dyed-in-the-wool conservatives, Neil Gorsuch, look at Jim Mattis, who before Trump ever announced, I always thought Mattis would be a great president, or great person to have at the highest levels of government because he is the real deal. He's putting these people that everyone on the right should just be going, I trust you completely now because you've fulfilled everything you said that you would do for the conservative movement. And yet they just can't. I think it's ego. I think it's sour grapes. I think it's interests. I think it's also stupidity.
Put China put Russia on the side for the time being, Brandon, and try to forecast ahead with me here as far as his foreign policy efforts are concerned. Do you think it would be a good idea, proper strategy to execute a visit actually to Beijing to sit down with the people in China?
Well, yeah. I actually wrote another article on this. part of my upcoming book on national security space policy, which is basically, space warfare and what's going on in our nation's space policy that no one's talking about, I provide a threat assessment for one of them, the countries was China. And you look at China and you have to understand that they are a revanchist power. They are heavily wedded to this idea that they have to rehabilitate the old Chinese empire that existed before the West colonized the region and before they were conquered by the Japanese. So while I think that, the President Trump should try to reach out to everyone, I think the notion of using coercive diplomacy, of backing up our diplomacy with force, I think is essential. I don't think we should just go to Beijing and try to have a talk. I think there should be some real. We should do something with Taiwan where we make it clear that we're not gonna recognize the one China policy because it's not doing any of our friends or ourselves any favors. I know that's what Trump just said, is that he recognizes the one China policy, but he needs to step back from that, I think. He needs to go to Beijing. I think it's about timing, though, and he needs to recognize that as much as he wants to make a great deal, Beijing is run by an ultra-nationalist named Xi Jinping, and he is not interested in a better deal. He wants to take Taiwan. He wants to control Hong Kong fully. Mm-hmm. He wants to rebuild the Chinese empire, and that means pushing America out of East Asia. That means putting Japan in its place. That means doing things that harm America's interest in the region. So if we're going to go to Beijing, there needs to be a build-up to it, and it needs to be diplomacy matched with with the threat of force, with coercion if necessary.
Now the situation with Russia is interesting. It's fraught with some peril, depending upon what moves Trump makes, what Putin has to say about some of those moves, what the negotiations between those two, what kind of fruit it can eventually bear, if any. Should Trump, in your opinion, allow Russia to do some things that they want to do in the interest of containing some of those fires around the world that Russia can be an important ally with the United States on? It's an interesting paradox when you think about it in terms of, interests to the United States as per the relationship between the United States and Russia and what that will mean for ensuring America's interests around the globe with the assistance of a country like Russia. How do you see that whole thing working out?
Well, there's a great book by Dmitry Trenin. It came out last year, and he was one of Kissinger's acolytes, and it's called Should We Fear Russia? It's about 150 pages, and I recently stumbled upon it, and he addresses this, and I have addressed for the last year in my articles, and basically we need to recognize, first thing, Russia's not going away. Right? They have thousands of nuclear warheads. They have, for the last decade, been engaged in one of the most incredible military modernizations in history.
Yeah, but at the same time, Brendan, if I can interject, their economy sucks right now. Their military equipment is antiquated. They've got one aircraft carrier, I think, and that's from the bygone era. While they do talk a big game, I think that their bark right now is a little bit worse than their bite potentially is.
Well, you are right to a point. So it depends on what issue we're talking about. First of all, do I think that we should try to stabilize the Russia relationship? 100% yes. I think this is idiotic that the Democrats just cut off Moscow. They're too important of a player. They're too big of a player to just cut out. But the second point is, in certain areas, they have the ability to overcome Western military dominance. For instance, in Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, they have more mechanized infantry units available than we do. And frankly, to answer your question, if they're going to take eastern Ukraine, I cannot imagine the Trump administration or any American supporting sending our kids to go fight and die for eastern Ukraine, especially when it's mostly ethnic Russians. So, there are some things we might have to give them. I would prefer not to, obviously. I am skeptical of Russia, and you are right, they are a house of cards, and so that is concerning to me. But I do think that we might need to give a little bit. So, for instance, if we have to give eastern Ukraine, fine, but we better reinforce NATO or at least the regional battle groups like Visegrad Battle Group, because they're not going to stop trying to push us around. And so when you're dealing with someone like that, a bully, you do have to find ways to basically stop them using, we're going to reciprocate basically if they go too far. in regards to ISIS, we do need them to fight ISIS with us because they're there on the ground right now. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be trying to engage them more. It's a mixed bag. It's like China. It's on the one hand, you've got some things you can do with them, but on the other hand, we need to recognize that they do not want us in what they perceive as their sphere of influence, and we have made agreements to back up certain European countries.
Going back before the election, and I'm interested this is the first time we've got an opportunity to talk, obviously, Brandon, so I don't know how you felt about this, but in terms of the claims that were made by the Obama administration and other branches of government that were convinced that Russia influenced the election, do you take at face value those claims, number one? And number two, the thing that I've never been able to wrap my mind around, and maybe you can help me with this, is how Russia could actually tilt the axis of power in Trump's direction to win the election, when, in my opinion, it would have served Russia's interests better with a weaker leader like Hillary Clinton to win the election. I think that the liberals, Hillary Clinton, and the entire Democrat Party tilted the election in Trump's direction all on their own without any influence from Russia or anybody else. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, so basically, it's, to use Joe Biden's quote, it's malarkey, this notion that the Russians were manipulating the election for Donald Trump because Donald Trump has a thing for Russian hookers, or whatever they were saying. It's insane. It's literally insane. And some of the people that were espousing this, I could not believe that they were going before Capitol Hill in December, the DNI Clapper and the National Security Agency director, I'm forgetting his name now, he's an admiral, and, of course, John Brennan. I couldn't believe that these people, with their years of experience, were forwarding these utterly unsubstantiated and fallacious rumors to the United States Congress, to the American people. If anyone was trying to influence anything, it's these handful of Obama Democratic intelligence political appointees who are trying to use their status to influence people's perception that somehow Donald Trump's presidency isn't legitimate. And, Michael Walsh, the great writer, he talks a lot about the quote-unquote deep state. And I think that's at play here. I think you've got a lot of Democrats in the intelligence community, by no means the entire intelligence community. They are not representative of the entire IC, but you have a handful of mid to senior level people, predominantly in the CIA and the NSA, who have an axe to grind with Donald Trump, and they're going to try to impugn him every way they can. The fact is there's no there. I have friends of mine who work on Capitol Hill. We talk about this all the time. It's absolutely fallacious, and there's a reason that no other actions aside from leaks have occurred, because there's nothing there. The FBI has 3 times come out in the last year and said there's no Trump-Russia connection, and then with the Flynn thing, they said that the transcript of the recording of Flynn with the Russian ambassador during the transition, they said he absolutely never spoke about sanctions. No laws were violated. This is all a deception operation on the part of the Democrats. The Russians, you're right. They actually, a mentor of mine used to work at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was a Sovietologist for 40 years. He's retired now, and he teaches at the Institute. And he and I talked over the summer, and I asked him point blank, I said, look, do you really think that the claims about Putin being soft on Russia is true? And he looked at me, he said, I know for a fact that the Russians, they know how to respond to either a Hillary Clinton or a Jeb Bush, and they want someone like that because they know how far they can go, and they know how to push us around then. He said, with a guy like Trump, he's a free radical. Putin has no idea. The book is thrown out. They're going to be completely off balance. They don't know how to respond to him. They're scared of him. And so I don't buy this notion that the Russians were behind, the influence of the election. This was a groundswell of American people saying we don't like the status quo. We want to stop it. And this is the Democrats in the intelligence community and the former Obama people trying to smear and impugn Trump so he can't pass his agenda.
Hour 2 of the Dino Report, and it's Brandon Weichert. You can read his columns at AmericanGreatness.com. Also go to his website as well. Go to WEICHERTReport.com. How would you mentioned that he's kind of a wild card, is basically what you were saying, and the unpredictability of him is really hard to define by not only Russia, but I guess other countries as well, who are trying to really get a grasp on Trump, what he might do next, and so on and so forth. And I'm interested, Brandon, in knowing how you would define him. He's of course a Republican president, but is he a Republican? I don't think that he is anyone's textbook definition of a out-and-out conservative. He's not a Democrat. He's not a liberal. When you talk about Trump, how do you define him politically?
I would say that he is a rightist. I think that he is a man of the right, but he is not necessarily a conservative in the way that Reagan or George W. Bush, claimed to be.
And that's a good thing, though, I think.
I think that I'm a big fan of flexibility. Obviously, I have a worldview, and I believe politics, the thing that separates us from the rest of the world, America, the thing that separates us politically is that we champion, and Margaret Thatcher said something up to this effect when she analyzed America, is that America, it's always about philosophy. And so I really appreciate people who enter politics with a philosophy, and I believe Trump has a philosophy, by the way, but I also love people who want to just do the right thing. And I get this sense from Trump that however hard around the edges he may be for some people, I really believe him when he says that he wants to make America great again. And I don't think it's a racist statement. I think he's just pointing out that there have been decisions made for at least the last 25, 30 years since the end of the Cold War that have been absolutely devastating to a majority of Americans, regardless of race. It's a class thing. It's the coast, the 20% wealthy people on the coast of America have all gotten wealthy and they like this system, and the rest of the 80% of the people are suffering. And so I think that his governing philosophy is of the right, but that he's going to do the right thing. So, for instance, if we need infrastructure spending, like he said last night, he's going to do that, even though that's traditionally a Democrat, quote unquote,
right.
Concept. And I love it. I think it's great. We need that. We need people who are going to do things.
Yeah, no question about it. What about his relationship with the media? Your thoughts on that? The comical and preposterous idea that Trump is somehow an impediment to free press in this country, and he's an impediment and maybe a threat to the First Amendment. And you've seen the stories that have been written.
Yeah,
you've seen some of these talking heads who have said this kind of comical stuff.
I've written at least in the last 2 weeks 5 or 6 articles on this at American Greatness. And 2 of them were carried on by Real Clear Politics, which I was very happy because I got more people reading. I want to just tell your listeners that what he's doing is the best thing for the First Amendment. What he's doing is breaking monopolies. He is breaking the monopoly of the entrenched elite media that happens to be mostly of the left, who, by the way, the media is probably 50 to 60% the reason why George W. Bush was never able to implement the policies that initially we all thought he was going to implement. It was because he was constantly being sidetracked by these just ridiculous attacks from the left. And he never fought back. There was never any pushback. And that's why his presidency by the second term was a disaster. But Donald Trump from day one is fighting back because he's not from the political world. He doesn't believe in these shibboleths, of, well, I have to respect the media and the president has to rise above it all. No, he's going to get in their face. He's a man who's spent his whole life fighting for what he believes in, what he wants. And what he wants is a good presidency, and he realizes these guys are going to be in his way, so he's going to punch through it. He's not the first president to do this, by the way. He's the first president in probably our lifetimes who've done something like this. But go back to Andrew Jackson. Go back to Lincoln, who was jailing reporters. Go back to, FDR, who, he had a cushy relationship with them, but the press were his lapdogs because he let everybody know that he was the president and he was going to do things he wanted to do. This is no different. Trump is putting the media in its place, which is they have the right to do what they're doing, but the 4 or 5 major networks are not the only media today. And so he's democratizing media. He's empowering other groups that otherwise would not have a voice, like the Christian network EWTN. I mean, who would have thought you'd see them at a White House press conference getting questions? It's not because they're soft to Trump. It's because he's actually trying to open the aperture up and get more voices in, which is great for our democracy. It's great for the republic.
I agree with everything you just said. What about these never-Trumpers? Let's get back to them. And they continue to this very day. And I just don't understand where these people are coming from. Maybe you can help me and my audience understand them and comprehend them a little bit more. Based on the fact alone that if Hillary Clinton was the president right now, we would not have Neil Gorsuch as the next Supreme Court judge. And the reverse would be true. You'd have a liberal Supreme Court for a generation ahead. Based upon that one thing only right there, you would think that the never-Trumpers' ideas and philosophies would be smashed to smithereens. And yet these people, is it a question of, Brandon, in your opinion, that they're like McCain, they're like Kasich, they're like Mitch McConnell, that simply because one of their own elite establishment, traditional career politicians is not the president, and this interloper came in, crashed the party, ate all the food, drank all the wine, he's the president, he's calling the shots. They simply cannot think about this in rational terms because he is so radically different from what a Republican president used to represent. And no, you know what? They'll find ways to come up with all kinds of ideas of why their never Trump philosophy is right.
Well, you're correct about that completely. So Angelo Codevilla has a great book called The Ruling Class, and he talks about the divide in America is not Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus liberal. It's the ruling class versus what he called the country class. And
it's also I've summed it up by saying we now have patriots versus globalists.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yes. And so there's that at play. There's what you talked about with the fact that, well, Trump, even though he went to Wharton, let's face it, Trump is not of the the Nantucket set. He's not of that kind of Caroline Kennedy, going to regatta week, in the Northeast with, on her yacht. That's not what he is. He has a lot of what a very good friend of mine who made a lot of money early in life. He calls it FU money. He has a lot of that, and a lot of these never Trumpers are from that kind of very stuffy old money mentality, where even if they didn't come from money, they surrounded themselves professionally with people who did. And so they're literally programmed from school to look at the world through a very closed kind of programmatic way. It's called checklist conservatism. And if you don't meet all of their parameters, and if you don't look the part, you don't dress the part, don't talk the part, well, frankly, you're not going to be in the club. And then the club can get very nasty to those members that it decides, or to people it decides not going to be members. And so Trump is that person who has been, not allowed in the club, but Trump is saying, I don't care, I'm going to start a bigger, cooler, better club that's more inclusive. And they can't take it. They cannot take it because he is undoing their monopoly, just like the media. This guy is the ultimate trust buster in a way. He is undoing all of the monopolies that have dominated our culture since at least FDR's time. And so that's why the never-Trumpers, they don't like it because he doesn't fit the mold of what they think is a good president. And I would remind people that most of the never-Trumpers are, and I'm a professional writer now as well, but most of the never-Trumpers have never really had a real job in their lives. They've never had to actually eke out a living, and they've never had to experience what it is to see the factory in your local hometown uprooted and moved overseas, and then you're left with nothing. They don't know what they can't relate. There's no empathy there, and they don't understand it. And so Trump is saying, I've got the empathy. I know what these people are going through. We're not going to listen to you anymore because you're leading us astray.
For a perfect picture of liberal mentality, about a week and a half ago, I saw on the O'Reilly Factor, I saw Bill O'Reilly having Mark Cuban on. O'Reilly said to Cuban, can you not cede the fact that Trump's idea about keeping factories open in America and keeping people working, and this is important, can you not cede the fact that this is something that even as somebody who opposes Trump, can you not, Mark Cuban, cede the fact that this is something good? It took Cuban 2 seconds to respond and say, no, not really.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, guys like Cuban, guys like Warren Buffett, they're not liberals in the sense that you and I talk about it. They are very greedy. And why did Buffett support Obama? Why did he do these things, saying that he shouldn't be making less than his secretary? We found out why. He's opposed to the Keystone Pipeline because if the Keystone Pipeline goes through, Warren Buffett's going to lose a lot of money in terms of transit fees because right now there's a train line, I guess, that takes a lot of the oil from that we get, and that he owns this train. He's making a lot of money off of it, and if we put the pipeline in, he's going to lose money. That's why he really was for Obama. And then the same thing with Cuban. Cuban is heavily invested in what's known as the knowledge economy. He's a big investor into this newfangled economy that's going to leave most of the blue-collar, working-class people out in the cold unless they're young enough to be able to go back to college and basically, learn how to type. So for Cuban, it's really more of self-interest, and that's actually why these business guys who are corporatists, these leftists, I don't have any respect for them. At least with Bernie Sanders, I understand that this guy actually believes this stuff. I don't like it, but at least I know where he's standing. But these corporatists like Buffett and Cuban, they're not. It's not even about politics for them. It's just it's also personal, like what we talked about earlier with Trump not being a part of that club, and it's business for them. They think that he's going to hurt their bottom line, and so they're going to oppose him no matter what. Mark Cuban is not a he doesn't care. He just wants to make money. Remember, this is the guy who in 2006 did two very important business deals, real estate deals with Donald Trump. It was singing his praises in 2015, and then all of a sudden when he realized that Donald Trump was serious about tariffs and was serious about protectionism, which of course is a dirty word to the cult of free trade, that's when he turned on him. I don't even think this is about morals or ethics. This is just about he doesn't want his bottom line being hurt.
Yeah. Do you think that Mike Pence takes his role as the vice president in this Trump presidency in any way different from a number of other vice presidents, whether they were Democrats or Republicans in the years preceding the Trump presidency? Do you see him having an impact and an effect on the overall governorship of this administration differently than maybe other vice presidents have?
It's an interesting question because there was a very telling remark that he made, and I think it was to Gloria Borger of CNN. It was in October of 2016. It's right after he I think it was actually earlier than that. It's right after he got the nomination as Veep. He was walking on an airport tarmac, and she asked him, "What kind of vice president do you want to be?" And he looked over at her without missing a beat, and all he said was, I was very close, and I respected and admired and want to be like Dick Cheney. And that kind of was glossed over, but I thought that was a very telling remark of how he views his role in the administration. Now, in practice, I don't know, because I can't fathom Condoleezza Rice, for instance, lying to Dick Cheney the way that Pence claims Flynn lied to him about Russia. Mm-hmm. So I don't know in terms of practice, but I do believe, first of all, I'm originally from Indiana. I have always had a soft spot for Mike Pence. I think he's a decent guy, and I wouldn't be opposed to him having a more active policy role. I worry that he is far too ensconced in that checklist conservative mindset. And while I love the fact that Trump is getting a lot of different opinions, and it's clear that he is, from everywhere in the administration, I just would, if he is being deferred to on many issues, I would hope that Pence would recognize that Trump won on a very specific platform, and that is not to be mindlessly ensconced in the cult of free trade and the kind of checklist conservatism that dominated George W. Bush's presidency.
Well, that's interesting what you're saying. Yeah, it's interesting. Your notes on Trump or on Pence are very interesting. In retrospect, as you look back now, do you think there might have been a more ideal choice that aligned themselves with Trump's philosophies and visions better than that of Mike Pence?
That's a good question. I personally, I think that Pence was probably, given what was going on at the time and the fact that Trump needed to try to keep that party together, Pence was probably the best pick. If I could choose anyone, man, that's a good question. I love Carl Icahn, who was, of course, Trump's buddy, but mm-hmm. Icahn would never make it in politics.
Right.
He doesn't want it.
No, he wouldn't want that.
No. I don't know. I really think that Pence was probably the best choice because he's not a typical Republican, and at the same time, he satisfies the more traditional conservative element of the party. He was kind of that necessary unity ticket, but I don't think he's as bad as George H.W. Bush was for Reagan. I don't think he's anywhere near that level of complete difference from Trump. So I think he was. I think given the choices at the time, I think he was probably the best pick.
Mm. Well, to wrap it up, Brandon, of course, we hope, those of us that are advocates of this Trump presidency and feel this renewed sense of excitement and optimism across the country, and we're looking forward to seeing how this whole thing will culminate eventually. Do you see a path over the next 4-8 years where Trump is able to not only outline an agenda, but to keep the campaign promises and to make America the great country that he wants to make it again? And I'm with you. I believe that he does have a determination to do exactly that. We hope that this all is going to be fruitful. We hope it's going to end up being something that finds people like you and me and millions of others justified in our support and our vote for Donald J. Trump. Do you see the path to getting these things done? And then the second part of the question is, if the path that he wants to go down is something that he's going to be precluded from doing, and maybe the Trump presidency is going to be less than he and supporters like you and me hope it's going to be, what would occur, what could occur that could prevent Trump from taking advantage of all the things he wants to do?
Well, I'll answer your last question first. It's very simple. If this whisper campaign, this ceaseless whisper campaign that's been going on in D.C. for the last 3 months about Trump, Russia, Trump not being legitimate, if this continues to build, and if elements within the intelligence community continue with the leaking and the strategically pinpointing when they're going to do it to undermine him, it's going to give fuel to the Never Trump wing of the GOP in Congress, and it's going to also fuel the DNC. But if they can keep getting legislative victories, the Trump team, if he can keep winning that way, nothing gives you success like success. And so the Republicans in Congress, the Paul Ryans and Mitch McConnells of the world, no matter how much they want to try to stop him, they know that the base is galvanized as never before, and they want to retain power more than anything. So if Trump can get one legislative victory, or preferably two in the next 200 days, preferably Obamacare coupled with tax reform, then let me tell you something, it's going to keep building on itself, because the Democrats are too marginalized right now, and the Republicans are too scared in Congress right now to really fully challenge him. And so that even if these leaks and this persistent whisper campaign continues, Trump is going to continue to overcome that. And secondly, he's got to keep Twittering. He's got to keep going to the people directly. He cannot stop. He's got to keep pushing this thing, because he's the only one who really believes in his agenda in terms of elected people. And if he can keep doing what he's been doing, he will continue to have success, and he will win another 4 years. And he'll not just make America great, but he'll, in 8 years, have kept America great. And that's the key. So success upon success, that's what he needs.
Brandon, I can't thank you enough for your time here this evening.
No, thank you.
Really enjoyed this conversation. We implore people to go to your website, WEICHERTReport.com, and also to read your stories at AmericaGreatness.com. Let's stay in touch. Let's do this again. We continue.
Please, I would any time.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Brandon.
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon Weichert, former Republican congressional staffer, national security expert, now runs the Weichert Report. Go to www.theweichertreport.com. It's an online journal of everything geopolitical, and he's a smart, intelligent guy, and obviously a huge Trump advocate as well. 2 hours in on the Dino Report on this Wednesday. It's March the 1st, 2017, across North America, many parts of the world. You want to get on board the show, you can, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, because kicking off hour number 3, sports, politics, life, everything in between. You just heard a lot of political talk. We'll go back to the sports side of the equation. It's going to be former 12-year NFL veteran, the one and only Anthony Becht, is going to